At first glance, the concept is simple. Drop people into remote wilderness with almost nothing. Limited tools, no food, no shelter, and force them to survive purely on instinct, skill, and mental endurance. It's marketed as the ultimate survival experiment, stripping life down to its most basic elements and seeing who can endure it. In the beginning, it feels controlled. Medical checks are done. Safety teams are nearby. Participants are monitored from a distance. There's always the assumption that, no matter how extreme things get, there is still a system in place to intervene if necessary. But nature doesn't follow production plans. Once the survival phase begins, the environment becomes the real authority. Heat, cold, dehydration, insect exposure, injuries from terrain, all of it starts stacking faster than expected. Small problems turn into serious ones when there is no immediate access to proper medical support. Cuts don't heal cleanly in humid jungles. Dehydration doesn't wait for camera breaks. Even simple exhaustion becomes dangerous when the body has no recovery buffer. And that's where the illusion of control starts to break. What was designed as a safe survival challenge slowly reveals how thin the line really is between entertainment and real physical risk. Participants are not actors. They are genuinely exposed to conditions that can escalate without warning. Even production teams, despite preparation, are constantly reacting rather than controlling outcomes. Every decision becomes a balance between continuing the show and ensuring someone doesn't cross a medical threshold. That's what makes these environments unsettling. Nothing feels dramatic in the traditional sense. It's not one big moment. It's the accumulation of small physical stresses that quietly push people toward their limits. And once that threshold starts to appear, it becomes clear that survival isn't just part of the concept. It is the entire reality. But survival shows are only the beginning. Next, things stop being about nature completely. Before we start the next chapter, please subscribe and help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Once we reach 1,000 subscribers, we can make part 2 of this video. Your support means a lot. On paper, it sounds like pure entertainment. A large-scale competition show built around a massive outdoor watercourse, designed to be chaotic, physical, and fun. Giant inflatable structures, sliding platforms, and high-energy challenges that look more like a playground than a production set. At the start, everything runs normally. Contestants arrive, cameras roll, and the atmosphere feels light. It's the kind of environment where nothing seems dangerous, because everything is designed to look soft, controlled, and harmless. Even the challenges themselves are framed as comedic rather than risky. But the problem with large shared environments is that they don't stay controlled for long. As filming continues, something begins to spread quietly among the cast and crew. At first, it's dismissed as a minor stomach illness, something that could come from travel, water exposure, or simple fatigue from long filming days. But it doesn't stop. More people begin reporting the same symptoms. What starts as isolated discomfort slowly becomes a production-wide issue. And because the show relies heavily on shared water systems and close contact between participants, the problem spreads faster than expected. It's eventually identified as a Giardia outbreak, a parasite linked to contaminated water exposure. And by the time it's fully understood, it's already inside multiple layers of the production. Filming doesn't just slow down, it collapses. Challenges are canceled, cast members are removed. Entire sections of production become unusable as safety concerns take priority over content. What was meant to be a fun, competitive environment turns into a logistical and medical emergency that no one planned for at this scale. The most unsettling part is how quickly it all happens. There is no dramatic turning point, just a steady breakdown of normal function until the entire production can no longer continue as intended. And if production environments can collapse this fast, what happens when the people themselves become the danger? It wasn't designed to be dangerous. The original idea was simple. Place a group of strangers inside a shared house, isolate them from the outside world, and observe how they interact under constant surveillance. Cameras in every room. No privacy, no escape, just social pressure and time. At the beginning, it worked exactly as intended. People formed alliances, argued over small conflicts, and adapted to the strange environment of being watched 24/7. It was framed as a psychological experiment in group behavior, controlled, structured, and heavily monitored. But isolation has a different effect on different people. When individuals are cut off from normal social environments, the pressure doesn't just build externally, it builds internally. Small conflicts start to feel larger. Trust becomes unstable. Emotional reactions become harder to regulate. And in the early days of reality TV, systems for psychological screening were not as strict or refined as they are today. That's where the risk begins to appear. Inside the house, tension between contestants can escalate in unpredictable ways. What starts as verbal conflict can shift into something far more serious when there is no external release, no real distance, and no way to fully step away from the situation. At one point during an early season, an incident involving a weapon inside the house forced production into immediate emergency response. It became a defining moment for how quickly a controlled environment could turn unstable when the wrong variables were present. Security protocols were updated after that, but the damage to the illusion was already done. Because once viewers saw that the environment wasn't just emotionally intense, but potentially physically unsafe, the entire concept of controlled reality started to shift. The house was no longer just a social experiment. It became a sealed environment where human behavior had nowhere to decompress. On the surface, it looked like one of the biggest reality competition productions ever created. Inspired by a globally successful fictional series, the concept was simple. Hundreds of contestants competing in large-scale physical and psychological challenges for a life-changing prize. Everything was designed to look cinematic, controlled, and visually impressive. But behind the scale, the production environment introduced a different kind of pressure. Because unlike scripted television, reality competition shows rely on real participants reacting in real time, often for extended periods under strict filming conditions. Long waiting times between takes, repeated challenge setups, and unpredictable environmental exposure all become part of the process. During outdoor segments, contestants were exposed to cold conditions for far longer than expected. What begins as manageable discomfort can gradually escalate into physical strain, especially when participants are stationary, lightly dressed for filming continuity, and required to remain in position for extended periods. In extreme cases, cold exposure doesn't announce itself dramatically. It builds slowly. Shivering becomes fatigue. Fatigue becomes slowed reaction, and once the body starts conserving energy, performance and awareness begin to drop at the same time. What makes large-scale productions like this particularly intense is the expectation of authentic reaction. Contestants are not acting, they are being filmed in real conditions, often under pressure to continue despite discomfort. Production crews monitor conditions closely, but the scale of filming means multiple zones, multiple cameras, and multiple groups operating at once. That complexity makes it difficult to fully eliminate risk, especially when weather conditions shift unexpectedly. But even controlled competition shows still try to stay safe. The next one didn't even try to stay in control. This is where reality television stops being just observation and starts directly interacting with real-world systems. Armed and Famous was built around a controversial idea, placing celebrities into real police training environments, letting them shadow officers, and exposing them to situations that normally involve high-stakes law enforcement decisions. On paper, it was framed as educational entertainment. a way to show what police work looks like from the inside. But in practice, the structure created immediate tension between production and reality. Because unlike scripted shows, law enforcement situations don't pause for cameras. Officers are responding to real calls, real individuals, and real legal outcomes. Introducing non-professionals into that environment adds a layer of unpredictability that cannot be fully controlled. During filming, there were instances where real arrests and active police responses occurred while cameras were present, forcing production crews to navigate legal boundaries in real time. Questions quickly emerged about what participants were allowed to see, what they were allowed to be involved in, and how much consent actually applied once a real situation began unfolding. The problem wasn't just participation, it was exposure. Participants were placed in proximity to situations that carried legal consequences, while production simultaneously attempted to frame those moments as entertainment content. That overlap created confusion not only for viewers, but also within the production itself, as ethical lines became harder to define in real time. As scrutiny grew, so did criticism. Law enforcement involvement in entertainment began to raise questions about exploitation, consent under pressure, and whether certain moments should ever be recorded for broadcast at all. At first, this show looked like a standard early reality TV experiment with a simple hook: a group of contestants competing for the chance to marry a supposed millionaire. The premise was designed around instant attraction, fast decisions, and high emotional stakes, all compressed into a single televised event. Everything depended on trust. Contestants were introduced to a man presented as extremely wealthy, successful, and ready to choose a partner on the spot. The production framed the experience as glamorous, almost like a real-life fairy tale unfolding in real time. But the foundation of that story began to crack quickly. As the show aired, details started to emerge that raised immediate questions about vetting and background verification. It became clear that key information about the central figure had not been fully disclosed to participants, or, at the very least, not properly verified before production moved forward. That single failure changed the entire tone of the experiment, because once contestants realized that the premise they had entered under might not fully match reality, everything around them became unstable, not physically, but emotionally and psychologically. Trust in the process itself began to collapse. The situation escalated further when legal and personal histories connected to the central figure came under scrutiny after filming. What had been presented as a high-value opportunity for love and connection began to look more like a rushed production built on incomplete information and assumptions. The real impact wasn't just public backlash. It was the realization that reality TV can function without full transparency at the most basic level. When production moves faster than verification, the people inside the show become part of a system they cannot fully understand until it is already in motion. That creates a deeper kind of risk, not physical danger, but informational uncertainty, where participants make decisions based on incomplete truths. And once that trust disappears completely, reality TV stops being a game. This final chapter represents the point where reality television crosses a line it can never step back from. During the production of a large-scale entertainment project involving aerial filming and coordinated stunt work, a helicopter was used to capture dynamic footage from above. The setup was designed to create cinematic coverage, wide shots, moving perspectives, and high-impact visuals that would elevate the final broadcast. On the ground, everything appeared structured. Timing was coordinated, personnel were positioned, and the sequence was prepared to run like any other controlled production environment. But aviation introduces a different level of risk, one that cannot be fully overridden by planning alone. As filming progressed, a sudden failure during the aerial sequence led to a catastrophic loss of control. Within seconds, What was meant to be a controlled filming setup turned into a fatal accident involving multiple individuals connected to the production. There was no scripted escalation, no build-up for the camera, just an immediate shift from production environment to emergency response. Ground crews and emergency services reacted instantly, but the scale and nature of the incident meant that recovery efforts replaced filming entirely. The production that was supposed to capture entertainment footage was suddenly dealing with real-world consequences at the highest level. When cameras are rolling in environments that involve aircraft, stunts, or high-risk coordination, the boundary between controlled storytelling and irreversible outcome becomes fragile. This is where reality TV stops being television and becomes real loss. For more disturbing real-world breakdowns, you can explore the other videos on this channel, where the footage only gets harder to forget the deeper you go.